Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
In Italy, there's no such thing as an all-you-can-eat buffet. And I walked into this little mom-and-pop Italian restaurant, and I said, "Feed me, I'm hungry," in Italian. It's "sono affamato." I can say it in 27 languages. I said to them, "Can we order?" And they said, "No, first we're going to bring out some food." My new home. So he brought out like sandwiches. He brought out fried calamari, potato and gnocchi, pollo voltastano, eggplant Milanese. Then he says, "Now we come, we take your order." They brought out food for hours. We were fighting amongst ourselves. We had a friend with us, Timmy. He was too skinny. We should have known. He shouldn't have come. Halfway through the meal, he died. And they kept on trying to feed him. They were smacking him. "What's the matter? You don't like it?" He's dead! Pass that over here!
Good morning. It's Saturday, Rules Saturday, October the 11th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have no free lunch, motivation, meditation, and Return of the Primitive. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David Bahnsen.
Incentives. The mounting burden of taxation not only undermines individual incentives to increased work and earnings, but in a score of ways discourages capital accumulation and distorts, unbalances, and shrinks production. Total real wealth and income is made smaller than it otherwise would be. On net balance, there is more poverty rather than less. Henry Hazlitt. I want to focus on one of the particular things that Hazlitt says here. That taxation undermines incentives for capital accumulation. He says more here, and much of it is tautologically true, that wealth and income are made smaller by taxation. And on a later page, I addressed the broad impact to incentives that redistributionism represents. But here I want to focus on incentives for capital accumulation. For the social engineer, this may seem not at all a negative. If the accumulation of wealth by some is a problem, insomuch as it merely skews the size of pie slices within the total pie, then perhaps this disincentive is no problem. Indeed, for the social engineer and social justice warrior of today, a capital decumulation amongst the wealthy may seem a noble aim. But alas, there is a problem. You knew that was coming. It is rooted in the zero-sum fallacy. The notion that there is a fixed amount of wealth in the universe and the accumulation of it by one means less available for another. But not only is this not true, the overall pie can and will grow through the productive behavior of human beings, meeting the needs of each other, but in stunting the actual capital formation that comes from one's capital accumulation, we disincentivize the very savings and investment that would otherwise benefit others. Taxes that punish capital leave less capital in the system and disincentivize capital investment. One person's savings is another person's borrowings. One person's investments are the source of another's equity, debt, capital projects, hiring, innovation, R&D, etc. In this sense, those who disincentivize the accumulation of capital for X do far more damage to everyone else than they do to X. Presumably, X already has wealth, but what they have done is cut off the ability of X to use his wealth to create wealth for Y and Z. This is counterproductive, and worse, it is immoral.
Thank you, and that was There's No Free Lunch by David Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, rules for retrogrades.
Rule 13. There are 4 classes of ideologue, but only the first 2 constitute terminal worldviews. The retrograde must know them and be able to spot them in real time. All adults of sound mind, yes, technically even radicals, qualify, fit into one of the following ideological categories. Retrogrades and radicals sit on the 2 opposite poles. Sadly for now, the latter is a much more capacious group than the former. Between them are 2 kinds of moderate. Militant mods are usually lukewarm liberals with some extrinsic reason for not calling themselves such or for militantly clinging to a false middle. Mod cons are faint-hearted but good-hearted people who sometimes call themselves conservatives, sometimes not, comprising the more or less decent folk who simply need good leadership but almost always lack it. The emphasis of this rule is upon public engagement in dialogue. Private engagement is a different animal altogether. As Dostoevsky often wrote, one-on-one engagement, even with a radical, proffers a unique opportunity at conversation, a rare gift from God. Together, getting into a jam and out of it, or sharing some unexpected solemn experience with no one else around, often makes die-hard friends out of bitter foes. Chance run-ins with estranged family members often lead to resolution. Strangers on an airplane sometimes bond deeply after an in-flight near miss. Autograph seekers dream about getting caught in an elevator with their heroes. These instances are some of life's most random and unexpected beauties. Capitalize on these opportunities, should they ever arise, but accordingly, they remain rare and unplannable. Mostly, the retrograde will engage radicals, militant mods, and mod cons out in view of others. Moreover, the engagement will usually involve a public appeal, a one-size-fits-all address to any and all listeners. We will proceed with the simplest first. In terms of public engagement, radicals always must be beaten at their own game, badly, definitively, and mercilessly. Publicly defeating them is the only conceivable way to reach them, and even then they almost never heed defeat's wisdom. Direct engagement in the combat of ideas fails for radicals, since their ideas fail facially, which is why they interrupt, shout, and set things on fire when they dialogue with retrogrades. By using these rules to overcome the radicals' histrionics and tantrums, one sees that they can very easily be beaten, but only very rarely converted, save for in private engagement, which again is rare. As such, usually public engagements with radicals don't accrue to the radicals' benefit, but rather for that of nearby third parties. Those nearby third parties will always be either militant mods or mod cons. Your target convert is the mod con, who is open-minded, friendly, and usually center-right, with a sinking suspicion about the truth. He is the unbrainwashed man of common sense. Militant mods, remember, are usually cowardly liberals who feel precluded by lifestyle accoutrements from self-billing as lefties, meaning they've made up their minds and already hate you almost as much as radicals do. Occasionally, you'll meet a militant mod who is truly militant about centrism rather than crypto-leftism. These are also non-convertible, but for different reasons. The key to winning over mod cons in your public forensics against radicals, or against cheeky militant mods who sometimes like to argue for centrism, is to rhetorically obliterate your interlocutor and to ooze magnanimity in victory. By this, Aristotelian magnanimity is designated, not false humility. This means calm confidence in victory, without any regret, but with a thoughtful mien, showing you've been victor many times before, i.e., this isn't new, and you'll maintain an element of mystery, i.e., surprisingly, you wish the best for your opponent. Conversion. Usually, mod cons will approach you privately after the debate, expressing their admiration, which will burgeon further if you look like a good-willed champ who's used to winning, but is mysteriously somewhat aloof to it all. In the dining car of a train traveling from L.A. to Chicago on the way to a philosophy conference, I once debated a stately Chicagoan who declared to the blue-haired SJW next to him that the American dream was a sham. I pointed out with a friendly smile that his statement was the sham. At least 3 of the 4 of us, my wife was next to me, were non-aristocrats, eating good food and availed of comfortable means of travel, sitting together peaceably expressing conflicting ideas as the sun set over the beautiful Rocky Mountains in the distance. That is the American dream, I told him, explaining that he was defining the term American dream wrong, i.e., it's not a guarantee that everyone will be equally or fantastically wealthy. An hour-long debate ensued. I prevailed. The next day, I was approached by a mod con who had been sitting 2 tables away and who described himself as a closeted conservative Hollywood screenwriter, one who had been inspired by my performance to emerge from his cover. These fights are clearly worth having.
And that was Rule 13 from Rules for Retrogrades, 40 Tactics to Defeat the Radical Left by Timothy J. and David R. Gordon. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little motivation.
What if you give it everything you have and you come up short? What if you get weak along the way and you throw in the towel on yourself? You surrender to your emotions. What then?
Everybody tripping through something. Everybody, I don't care who you are, you're going through something. But your great life is in front of you. It's not behind you. What you did back there ain't got nothing to do with what God got for you. What you did back there was learn the lessons to get you to where you are at this particular moment right here.
Maybe being weary doesn't mean you're weak.
We're in hell right now. And we can stay here, get the kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time.
It's okay to fall. Because when you fall, you get back up.
What I need you to do is I need you to find a reason to keep going. And if you can find a reason to keep going, I know you're strong enough to do it because you're human. And every human has what it takes to get past whatever they're going through if they decide to. Push through it. Push through it. Tragedy and trials come to everybody. Only the strong survive. Listen to me very closely. Y'all running from obstacles when in fact it's the obstacle that's going to take you to the next level. Like y'all running from pain. Y'all running from challenges. You telling me how difficult your life is. Do you understand it is the difficulty that's going to prepare you and take you to that next level? You ready to quit? You ready to give up? You ready to give in? You ready to tell me what's not working, who doing this, what's wrong? If you're not ready to get up every day and start all over again like nothing happened yesterday. Phenomenally skilled is cute, but it is a phenomenal will that says every time I get knocked down, I will get back up and I will succeed. I will not surrender.
As you go through the challenges of life and you look at it and embrace whatever comes to you, don't run from it. Step toward it. Don't try and duck it like most people do. See, most people want it easy. See, easy come, easy go. But when you go at what you're going to deal with and you deal with the difficulties of it, when you handle those hard things close at hand, making those hard decisions right now that you don't want to make, but you know that in order for you to get where you want to go, this is one of the hoops that you have to flip through.
This is what you do. You are built for this. You would just believe that your day coming, that the sacrifices you are making today, they gonna pay off. But if you do not believe, it ain't gonna happen. Keep fighting in the midst of the struggle. Keep fighting. Keep thinking positive. You only lose when you quit.
It'd be one thing if life was like NASCAR. When you only have one lap left, they wave the white flag to let you know this is the last one. This is it. If you can make it around here, your race is done. But life doesn't wave a white flag. So then we wave our white flag, not even knowing that just around the next turn, just around the next sacrifice, just if you can make it through this season, just if you don't give up in this trial. See, the reason you can't stop is because you might be so close. Wouldn't it be a shame for you to quit when you're this close? Wouldn't it be a shame for you to walk away when you've come this far? Wouldn't it be horrible for you to bail out when you're just this close to victory? You can't walk by what you see. You can't give up because it doesn't feel good. You can't let people talk you out of it. You can't let your emotions stop you from moving forward. Keep believing, keep moving, keep marching, keep crawling, keep inching. This might be the day. This might be the one.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, little Dr. Berg.
The number one most dangerous carbohydrate in the world is not sugar, but it's something that acts like sugar. It'll create more inflammation, more belly fat, more fatigue, more fatty liver, and more chances for getting type 2 diabetes. What is this carbohydrate? It's a starch. Not a starch like the potato that your grandmother made you. I'm talking about an industrial starch that is made in a lab. A starch is basically a string of sugar molecules connected in a chain. Because they went through an industrial process of heating and chemicals and deodorizing, these starches are so vulnerable to breaking down. When you consume them, they spike the blood sugar way more than actual sugar. The purpose of industrial starches is not to sweeten anything. It's basically to be a filler, to add bulk to something. It has no nutritional purpose. I'm talking about maltodextrin, modified food starch, cornstarch, modified tapioca starch, wheat starch. All of these industrial starches are basically hidden sugar. The number one...
And that was a little bit of Dr. Berg. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little more of Chapter 4 from Ayn Rand's book, Return of the Primitive.
4. An indication of such a motive was given by the rebels' demand for unrestricted freedom of speech on campus, with the consequent filthy language movement. There can be no such thing as the right to an unrestricted freedom of speech or of action on someone else's property. The fact that the university at Berkeley is owned by the state merely complicates the issue, but does not alter it. The owners of a state university are the voters and taxpayers of that state. The university administration, appointed directly or indirectly by an elected official, is theoretically the agent of the owners and has to act as such, so long as state universities exist. Whether they should exist is a different question. In any undertaking or establishment involving more than one man, it is the owner or owners who set the rules in terms of appropriate conduct. The rest of the participants are free to go elsewhere and seek different terms if they do not agree. There can be no such thing as the right to act on whim, to be exercised by some participants at the expense of others. Students who attend a university have the right to expect that they will not be subjected to hearing the kind of obscenities for which the owner of a semi-decent barroom would bounce hoodlums out onto the street. The right to determine what sort of language is permissible belongs to the administration of a university, fully as much as to the owner of a barroom. The technique of the rebels, as of all statists, was to take advantage of the principles of a free society in order to undercut them by an alleged demonstration of their impracticability, in this case, the impracticability of the right of free speech. But in fact, what they have demonstrated is a point farthest removed from their goals, that no rights of any kind can be exercised without property rights. It is only on the basis of property rights that the sphere and application of individual rights can be defined in any given social situation. Without property rights, there is no way to solve or to avoid a hopeless chaos of clashing views, interests, demands, desires, and whims. There was no way for the Berkeley administration to answer the rebels except by invoking property rights. It is obvious why neither modern liberals nor conservatives would care to do so. It is not the contradictions of a free society that the rebels were exposing and cashing in on, but the contradictions of a mixed economy. As to the question of what ideological policy should properly be adopted by the administration of a state university, it is a question that has no answer. There are no solutions for the many contradictions inherent in the concept of public property, particularly when the property is directly concerned with the dissemination of ideas. This is one of the reasons why the rebels would choose a state university as their first battleground. A good case could be made for the claim that a state university has no right to forbid the teaching or advocacy of any political viewpoint whatever, as, for instance, of communism, since some of the tax-paying owners may be communists. An equally good case could be made for the claim that a state university has no right to permit the teaching and advocacy of any political viewpoint which, as, for instance, communism, is a direct threat to the property, freedom, and lives of the majority of the tax-paying owners. Majority rule is not applicable in the realm of ideas. An individual's convictions are not subject to a majority vote, but neither an individual nor a minority nor a majority should be forced to support their own destroyers. On the one hand, a government institution has no right to forbid the expression of any ideas. On the other hand, a government institution has no right to harbor, assist, and finance the country's enemies, as, for instance, the collectors of funds for the Viet Cong. The source of these contradictions does not lie in the principle of individual rights, but in their violation by the collectivist institution of public property. The source of these contradictions does not lie in the principle of individual rights, but in their violation by the collectivist institution of public property. This issue, however, has to be fought in the field of constitutional law, not on campus. As students, the rebels have no greater rights in a state university than in a private one. As taxpayers, they have no greater rights than the millions of other California taxpayers involved. If they object to the policies of the Board of Regents, they have no recourse except at the polls at the next election, if they can persuade a sufficient number of voters. This is a pretty slim chance, and this is a good argument against any type of public property, but it is not an issue to be solved by physical force. What is significant here is the fact that the rebels, who, to put it mildly, are not champions of private property, refuse to abide by the kind of majority rule which is inherent in public ownership. That is what they were opposing when they complained that universities have become servants of the financial, industrial, and military establishment. It is the rights of these particular groups of taxpayers, the right to a voice in the management of state universities, that they were seeking to abrogate. If anyone needs proof of the fact that the advocates of public ownership are not seeking democratic control of property by majority rule, but control by dictatorship, this is one eloquent piece of evidence. 5. As part of the ideological conditioning for that ultimate goal, the rebels attempted to introduce a new variant on an old theme that has been the object of an intense drive by all statist collectivists for many years past: the obliteration of the difference between private action and government action. This has always been attempted by means of a package deal, ascribing to private citizens the specific violations constitutionally forbidden to the government, and thus destroying individual rights while freeing the government from any restrictions. The most frequent example of this technique consists of accusing private citizens of practicing censorship, a concept applicable only to the government, and thus negating their right to disagree. See my article on man's rights in the April 1963 issue of the Objectivist newsletter. The new variant provided by the rebels was their protest against alleged double jeopardy. It went as follows: if the students commit illegal acts, they will be punished by the courts and must not, therefore, be penalized by the university for the same offense. Double jeopardy is a concept applicable only to one branch of the government, the judiciary, and only to a specific judiciary action. It means that a man must not be put on trial twice for the same offense. To equate private judgment and action, or in this context, a government official's judgment and action, with a court trial is worse than absurd. It is an outrageous attempt to obliterate the right to moral judgment and moral action. It is a demand that a lawbreaker suffer no civil consequences of his crime. If such a notion were accepted, individuals would have no right to evaluate the conduct of others, nor to act according to their evaluation. They would have to wait until a court had decreed whether a given man was guilty or innocent, and even after he was pronounced guilty, they would have no right to change their behavior toward him and would have to leave the task of penalizing him exclusively to the government. For instance, if a bank employee were found guilty of embezzlement and had served his sentence, the bank would have no right to refuse to give him back his former job, since a refusal would constitute double jeopardy. Or a government official would have no right to watch the legality of the actions of his department's employees, nor to lay down rules for their strict observance of the law, but would have to wait until a court had found them guilty of lawbreaking, and would have to reinstate them in their jobs after they had served their sentences for influence peddling or bribe-taking or treason. The notion of morality as a monopoly of the government and of a single branch or group within the government is so blatantly a part of the ideology of a dictatorship that the rebels' attempt to get away with it is truly shocking. 6. The rebels' notion that universities should be run by students and faculties was an open, explicit assault on the right attacked implicitly by all their other notions, the right of private property. And of all the various statist collectivist systems, the one they chose as their goal is politico-economically the least practical, intellectually the least defensible, morally the most shameful. Guild socialism. Guild socialism is a system that abolishes the exercise of individual ability by chaining men into groups according to their line of work and delivering the work into the group's power as its exclusive domain, with the work dictating the rules, standards, and practices of how the work is to be done and who shall or shall not do it. Guild socialism is the concrete-bound, routine-bound mentality of a savage, elevated into a social theory. Just as a tribe of savages seizes a piece of jungle territory and claims it as a monopoly by reason of the fact of being there, so guild socialism grants a monopoly, not on a jungle forest or waterhole, but on a factory or a university. Not by reason of a man's ability, achievement, or even public service, but by reason of the fact that he is there. Just as savages have no concept of causes or consequences, of past or future, and no concept of efficacy beyond the muscular power of their tribe, so guild socialists, finding themselves in the midst of an industrial civilization, regard its institutions as phenomena of nature and see no reason why the gang should not seize them. If there is any one proof of a man's incompetence, it is the stagnant mentality of a worker or of a professor who, doing some small routine job in a vast undertaking, does not care to look beyond the lever of a machine or the lectern of a classroom, does not choose to know how the machine or the classroom got there or what makes his job possible, and proclaims that the management of the undertaking is parasitical and unnecessary. Managerial work, the organization and integration of human effort into purposeful, large-scale, long-range activities, is, in the realm of action, what man's conceptual faculty is in the realm of cognition. It is beyond the grasp and therefore is the first target of the self-arrested sensory perceptual mentality. If there is any one way to confess one's own mediocrity, it is the willingness to place one's work in the absolute power of a group, particularly a group of one's professional colleagues. Of any forms of tyranny, this is the worst. It is directed against a single human attribute, the mind, and against a single enemy, the innovator. The innovator, by definition, is the man who challenges the established practices of his profession. To grant a professional monopoly to any group is to sacrifice human ability and abolish progress. To advocate such a monopoly is to confess that one has nothing to sacrifice. Guild socialism is the rule of, by, and for mediocrity. Its cause is a society's intellectual collapse. Its consequence is a quagmire of stagnation. Its historical example is the guild system of the Middle Ages, or, in modern times, the fascist system of Italy under Mussolini. The rebels' notion that students, along with faculties, should run universities and determine their curricula is a crude absurdity. If an ignorant youth comes to an institution of learning in order to acquire knowledge of a certain science, by what means is he to determine what is relevant and how he should be taught? In the process of learning, he can judge only whether his teacher's presentation is clear or unclear, logical or contradictory. He cannot determine the proper course and method of teaching ahead of any knowledge of the subject. It is obvious that a student who demands the right to run a university or to decide who should run it has no knowledge of the concept of knowledge.
And that was the next part of Chapter 4 of Ayn Rand's book, Return of the Primitive, The Anti-Industrial Revolution, by Ayn Rand, and it's read by Bernadette Dunn. Back in a minute. Thank you, and this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that rights are not collective. They are joint and several.